Now, you asked him if he had molested any other, abused any other child, and he said no.
Yeah.
Do you have any evidence that he actually did?
I do not.
But Becky, what about the priest that abused you? Do you have evidence of other people that he abused?
Yes, I've actually spoken to 2 other victims, actually 3 other victims of his. And I've also spoken to another altar boy who was not a victim, but who witnessed my perpetrator abuse someone else. And in fact, he wrote a letter to the church for me describing what happened so that they would have that proof. And then with the help of all of you and votive, I put an ad in the paper asking if anyone remembered my perpetrator, and I got one response, and it was a very sad response. I got a letter, and it said, Father Reinecke was a curse let loose on St. Mary's, and that was the parish I was at, and it was followed by a poem about loss of innocence. So I'm assuming that's another victim as well. And he was a priest for 27 years. He was the chancellor in the Diocese of Arlington for 13, and that's where you would have gone if you wanted to tell someone about your abuse. So people couldn't have gone to him. So I feel, even though I only know of about 4 or 5 victims, I feel there are probably dozens who haven't come forward.
And Jim, what about the abuser? Are you aware of other victims of his?
Well, I was told that I was the only one, and I found those letters. And reading the letters, I know one of them. I can pretty well tell it was a parishioner at the same parish who was in high school and had just gotten out of a mental institution and was abused. One of the kids that used to work at the front desk, we got in touch, and he was abused. I went up to Brighton, to Massachusetts, to give a talk for Voice of the Faithful, and there was a person in the congregation who stood up and announced for the first time publicly that he was also a victim of the same guy. And he turned to me, and he knew he couldn't touch me because that's just something that victims don't do, but he wanted to give me a sign of respect in the worst way, and he was former military, and I was former military, so he just snapped a salute at me, and I mean, my heart was, I knew what he was saying just by the salute,
If there are, having had these experiences and lived with them for decades now, since each of your abuses, what is it that you would want to tell any of the viewers watching this program about that experience that you haven't already said, or anything about each other's story that you'd like to comment on? Wayne?
I'll go first. The one point that I'd like to get across in this message is that you're not unique and you're not alone. And there are many others out there just like you that have had the same stories. And you'll find, if you go to the meetings, you'll find that the stories are very much identical. But believe me, you're not alone and you're not unique. And you'll find, if you come to enough meetings, you'll hear your story one day, and which becomes very comforting.
Okay. Becky?
I feel the same way. I feel like if you're out there and you're feeling scared, you can contact so many places. You can contact SNAP. You can contact a Rape and Crisis Center. But please know, like Wayne said, you're not alone, and that you can come forward, and that there are those of us who've gone through the same thing, who felt your pain, and really understand, and you will be believed. And I think that was a big thing for me. I was afraid I would not be believed. And I think by coming forward and having people accept me, that took some of my shame away. And I think that that's a big thing towards healing.
Right. Jim?
Ditto, as far as victims are concerned. For the people who hear for the first time that your child or your brother or someone that you know was sexually abused, really, really, really imperative to get them into therapy as soon as possible. The sooner they deal with it, even if they're 8 years old, the sooner they can deal with it. There are specialists who work with child psychology and whatever. The more and the sooner they deal with it, the faster they can face it and live a fairly normal life.
If there are people listening to this program who either are abused, have been abused themselves, or know of others who have been abused, what do you find in working with people that impedes them from taking that first step?
I think it's fear. Fear, some people fear they'll lose their jobs. Some people fear that their family will find out and they'll think less of them. I mean, fear is, I think, the biggest factor stopping people from coming forward. But I have to say for myself, I had that fear. But I have found, for the most part, people are welcoming. People are supportive. People believe me. And I think that it's hard. You know, maybe you need to come forward to just one person first, and just know that you can take it, and it's your story, and you can take it as slow as you want to. And that I think it's important to keep, you know, you have that control. And that, you know, if you go to the police, okay. But if you can't do that, maybe you just want to tell your best friend. That's still making a step. And I think that you need to feel like you're in control when you're telling someone.
Okay. What do you think, Jim?
Absolutely. The more you tell your story, well, I'll say it gets easier, but I was talking to Becky beforehand. I said, all day at work today, I was a nervous wreck. I was just thinking about, and going through this, I could feel myself getting ready to let it go, you know? So, I mean, it's still there, you know? But the more you tell it, you convince yourself that you are the good person.
Okay. And Wayne?
I feel the most important thing that was given to me was that the fellow I met in the church that had the same story as mine was get busy, get active. You need to get active because the more you give, the more you get back. And it's absolutely true.